Hey everyone, Sarah Nova, and this time around we are talking about a 1940s Harley Davidson WLA. If you've ever watched an old war movie about World War II, you have probably seen this bike in some form or another. If you've ever been to a parade on the 4th of July, for that matter, you've probably seen a couple of these too. Um, this was Harley's sort of well, in general, this model was their lightweight. Is a 750. And it came out in 1937. And I'm a little fuzzy on some of these details, so if I get them wrong, please chime in the comments and correct me if you know more about these. But came out in 37, replaced their D model, and I believe that was the WL. And then when the war came around, the WLA was the War Department one. So you can see this is all done up with camouflage. You got ammo boxes on the front. You got your rifle. You got your shovel for digging in. Army kind of straps on the back. It's pretty common to find these like this. I'm imagining this was restored to this trim. I don't think this is the original scabbard that it came with, for example. Um, and that's just because they were such a big part of the World War II story. The bike itself is a very simple side valve motor, which is means this is the flat heads. They're also called flatheads. The valves operated by cams and open up and close down here, so intake and exhaust right next to each other, and they're opening this way instead of the overhead valves, which are that way. It's very different from a modern Harley in that way, but just like a modern Harley, 45 degrees between the cylinders, 45-degree V angle, which Harley has stuck with. It wasn't a whole lot of power, I think like 18 horsepower, which isn't much for a 750, but it was rugged, simple, easy to rebuild. You can take it apart in the field with next to nothing. It was replaced in 52 by the K model, which was unit construction. You can see here that the engine is separate from the transmission, which was common for this time period. And as time went on, all the British companies and the American companies, except for Norton and the Brits, moved to unit construction where the transmission was cast in with the crankcases. It was replaced with the K bike, and then the K bike became the XL bike, which is the modern day Sportster. What else about this thing? It's got a foot clutch, spring actuated, spring controlled sort of. It's a trip to ride one of these things. Hand shift, also known as a suicide shift. When you ride one of these, it almost feels like you're driving a truck rather than riding a motorcycle, because you have to get the clutch in, you pop it into gear, it grinds into gear, and then off you go using your foot to initiate the motion. And it's really weird. And it's, if you ride motorcycles with hand clutches for as long as most of us have, it's really weird to get used to that. So even if you start going and then you have to stop quickly, it's very hard to get yourself retrained to work like that. But it's kind of cool. That's just how they were way back when. It has a 3-speed gearbox, so again, it's not a speed demon, but it was reliable enough and simple enough, and parts were, didn't need a ton of parts to do a full rebuild. And if you ride one of these in the field, it would often need a full rebuild. It's got a bicycle pump for the same things. You change your tire on the go. Hardtail, rigid frame. That was also the norm back then. Swing arms didn't really come into vogue until the 50s. So this was kind of normal for this to have just a hardtail, and you would run your tire pressure a little bit lower in the back to make up for it. If you look at footage of where people rode these things, this was a time before they were dirt bikes and street bikes. These were ridden everywhere, across the desert, up through trails, up through woods. And then even after the war, the early American hill climbing scene and flat track scene and stuff, you would see these stripped down and used. And actually, the bobbers that we love so much kind of came from this kind of bike being taken, ex-military stock being bought up, and then all this heavy stuff taken off and just keeping the bare minimum to it, bobbing it, just like a bobbed haircut. So there's a lot of the beginnings of what is still popular in American motorcycle culture in here. You can if you do enough vintage picture searching and stuff, you'll find pictures of these things being jumped on tracks and definitely being hill climbed, and people falling off them, and it's crazy. And I love that. For me, the motorcycling spirit is always about what can you do with the bike you have, more than I got to find the perfect bike before I do anything. And this sort of thing was right for it. This was just what a motorcycle was back in the day, and the Army needed one, and they just put some stuff, painted it in olive drab and put some stuff on it, and off they went. So yeah, they're pretty cool. This motor actually, so 52 is when the K bike came out, and the WLs stopped being made. But the motor survived until 1973 because they put them into the Servicars, the utilitarian vehicles that would do, small deliveries, ice cream trucks, stuff like that, three-wheelers, and yeah, the motor lived on. And police departments would use them. I knew a guy who worked at a dealership that serviced all the Servicars for the Springfield, Mass. Police Department, and he hated these things, but they were simple enough, and they did the job. Underpowered, but reliable enough. They're fun. They're cool. There is really very little that's exciting about them, other than trying to master the foot clutch, I would say. But they are really truly unique to ride if you're used to modern bikes. And it's just such a utilitarian thing about it. It's just it's just kind of cool. I mean, I always look at we get a shot of the pipe over here at some point. The pipe didn't fit quite where the engine was and the guard they needed, so they just smushed the pipe to fit. Very much like on a BSA Gold Star, they put a bigger oil pump in and it didn't fit the frame, so they just put a kink in the frame to go around the oil pump. That kind of stuff seems so silly and so simple. When you realize that was a factory solution, it really gives you perspective on how simple this really can be, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, Um, yeah, I just love to look at the details of it. You got the sprung front end up here, like a Springer front end up here, the big springs. The airbox is this huge snorkel off a very very rudimentary carburetor. I don't know if that's a Linkert or if that's, I don't know what they're running back here. Again, out of my normal wheelhouse, but very simple carburetor, and then an airbox that's clearly meant to be ridden through very dusty and wet conditions, very sealed, very protected. So this thing was meant to survive and to really go through some rugged places. And I like that too. I like a utilitarian aspect to a machine. Um, yeah, what else can I say? If you know stuff about these things, chime in. If I get something wrong, please chime in. But if I just didn't say stuff and you know some more facts, I love it. We get some really good comments, people telling good stories about the bikes, about the details of the bikes, but also just about riding the bikes. I really enjoy reading the comments of people who have experiences on these machines and tell some stories, because with this vintage stuff, that's kind of what it's about. So please chime in. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. It does help. We'll see you next time.